Okay, my friend, an announcement from NASA today that they have discovered where water left a big debris pileup on Mars from, they say, about 3 billion years ago. Now let's examine that a little deeper. Okay, this is right from NASA. They're drilling rock cores to see what they can find, and they're going to try to figure out what's going on with Mars. Was there anything alive? Now listen to this.
The big question that we have for Mars is, did life ever exist on that planet?
Yes, well, let's see if we can figure it out. All right, they have incredible stories to tell about the history of Mars, and so do I. And Perseverance rover is up there now, but there was an earlier one, Curiosity, and it's still doing business, and the business it did 8 years ago proved life without a shadow of doubt. Let me show you. Okay, what you have to understand is that this goes back to about 2015. And they were sending back these pictures from Mars, and everybody's laughing because people say, oh, that must be a crab. Images for Mars crab. Then they had Mars blueberries. Then they had Mars Morse code. And then they had all kinds of things that I knew what they were because I had been studying mud fossils for at least 5 years prior to this. And when I saw them, I knew exactly what they were. So I'm going to show you exactly what they are. That's the Mars crab. Let's take a look close up. All right, these are the hex patterns they found. Okay, this right here is an artery. And these are the little blood vessels that service all these sarcomeres, which are muscle tissue, and I'll show you those anatomically in a second. This one right above it is the vein. That pulls the blood back up to the heart to be recycled. This sends the blood down and pumps it into these tissues. And what are these tissues? These are called sarcomeres. And what does a sarcomere do? Well, they pull in, and there's a red fluidy stuff in there which has eroded. That's what this is. You see, this is the erosion from these sarcomeres. That's why this is literally blood cells and red fleshy stuff that eroded out. It left the structures. Now notice carefully. You see all those zillions of little lines all the way across everywhere. And then every now and then you'll have a block and a block and a block and a block and a block like this. You see it? That's the structure of a muscle. Let me show you what muscles look like, sarcomeres. But don't forget, this just happens to be where they're all getting their blood from in this particular area. And there'll be a bunch of these. You need a lot of blood to service all muscle. You see that? These are the sarcomeres. And these are a contracted set, and these are just relaxed. They erode on these. These are literally glued together. And you can tear these. Tear a torn muscle, and it will tear pretty much on these lines most of the time. These are the things that pull in and out, and that's why there was so many little layers as we saw in the Mars crab. Now you're going to have blood servicing. You have a ton of blood to service these, and I'll show you some that are in a rock that, well, let me show you. You see that? That's a rock. But these are sarcomeres. That's exactly what I just showed you. And this is the red blood flushing down through to service all these. And of course, that's the upper layer of skin above. That's the top. And there's this much fleshy stuff, and then you get into your muscle. And that's your muscle, and this is your red blood. And they break along these lines, you see, but they'll slip. And they are flushed with blood, and that's natural, I believe. Is there's passageways for the blood to go through to service all of these, because they take a ton of blood, and when you're really working them, they take 2 tons. That's just another shot of sarcomeres. It's showing this is the same as this. I didn't make that. This is from an anatomy book. This, and then this is really blown up here. And then there's a layer of skin. This really should be over the top, and then the muscles are below. Or it could be the back of the leg or something, and you know what I'm saying. But they're in the middle, below a bunch of flesh. You have to have something above your muscle. All right, so that should be pretty darn obvious. That is muscle. That's a vein and artery, and it's exactly like the muscle sarcomeres. I showed them to you very, very clearly. Now that's only case number one. Now let's take case number two. All right, you can look this one up if you like. These are called the Mars Blueberries, and they see these little blueberries all over the place, and they don't know what they are. Well, I know exactly what they are. They're exact same thing as the Mouqi Marbles. What you're seeing here, underneath here, this is what they call the basement layer of skin. Above that is a layer of, well, let me show you the anatomical, sort of make it quite obvious. But you have a layer of fleshy stuff that can move around, and it's called interstitium now. And they didn't even really realize it until just recently. It's pretty recent, discovery, to be perfectly honest with you. I could see it in the giants long ago, but they couldn't see it because they were working with autopsy results where they had the fluidy parts drained out, so they saw it as a thick mat, and they called it as a thick mat of interstitium. Well, it's not. It was a big fluffy fluidy thing. Let me show you. Let's just start with this. Meet your interstitium, a newfound organ. This is only on 2018, and this is this gooey area here that before they would get it, it would be flat as a pancake, and they thought it was a thick mat. But it's not. It's got all kinds of little balls in there. I don't know if you can see those or not. You see all these little tiny balls? Those are interstitium balls. They're all over the earth. And this layer here is the layer of immunity. And all your enzymes and your bacteria are in this layer. And they go into this fluid-filled highway to protect you from invasion. That is your immune system. And you have to have all the bacteria in there or you don't get the enzymes. Simple as that. All right, I just showed you all those little tiny balls. That's what these are. These are those little tiny balls. And they're all over the earth, too. These are called the Mouqi Marbles. Same stuff. These are the same as these, only they're next to the ocean. And this is United Kingdom, Hunstanton Beach, Hunstanton Cliffs. And this is the interstitial layer. That had all these balls stuck in there, and they would just fall out because they're hard. They don't erode. In here, all the other stuff erodes, turns into actual mud, literally mud. And guess what? Remember the blueberries? Those were the Mars Blueberries. Those must have been in a wet environment because there's other place up there where there's Mars Blueberries that were not in a wet environment. I'm going to show them to you right now. They call them the Mars Morse code. And what are they? They're these right here. Now don't forget, here's what we got. This is brand new. Before they would find it flat, just like a flat mat, because all of the fluid would get out. But these are little springy things, but the black ball is a really tough thing. But look at how you can see in a blow up. It's starting to get blown up. Here it's pretty well blown up. You can see all those little balls. They're everywhere. And this is what it really looks like when you get right down into the gooiness of it. All right, and that's these balls, and that's these balls. The creatures that were on this earth and the creatures that were on Mars were astronomically large. That's all I can tell you. And they talked about in the ancient myths, this kind of stuff. I'm going with the myths at this point. And just to make something perfectly clear, when I say the myth, I'm talking about the ancient texts, literally all of them. I take them and I look at them and I try to make sense of what makes sense. And I could see where God would be so upset with the disaster that happened here on Earth, with all the absolutely terrible, and it's just as bad now. He would send something to just clean it off. And that's exactly what happened. And that's when everything basically got wiped off the face of the planet. And then it restarted, it rebooted. And that's exactly what Yale is saying. They're saying these particular soft body creatures that I'm showing were preserved perfectly in some worldwide thin layer of catastrophe by salty silicate waters. And they didn't realize it was hot water, but it is hot water. It was a hot water flood because we almost got hit by Venus. Okay, as everybody knows that's been following me, I claim that virtually there is nothing that is not mud fossils. Mud fossils are creatures' bodies that have turned into stone. Okay, here's another one from Curiosity. Long ago, 8 years ago or more, this is the Mars Morse code. Well, I just showed you what interstitium looks like, and it is all of these balls attached in placements, and then the skin can stretch and pull, but the strap will bring it back to where it was. All right, this is pinched together skin, pinched together, stretched. Now, up there, there's this particular spot, there's no moisture. Otherwise, it would have turned into mud. This is like sandblasted. And you can see how finely, and the bumps, this would be a bump risen up here. And it eventually eroded that away. The straps are much weaker than the balls. The balls, that's why they found those blueberries. They're just all independent of each other because it had eroded. Now, I would suspect when I saw that was a product of watery erosion. This is a product of basically sandblasting. You see this? I would say that was watery erosion. It's certainly not like the sandblasted ones. They piled up here and there, and I'd say that was from water. So there was water. Well, it was just like Earth, as far as I can determine, and the creatures were just the same as they were on Earth, absolutely stunningly large. All right, check this out. This is just sticking up here in the ocean. They have no clue why it's just this piece, and they're saying this is millions of years in one picture. They think every one of these little layers is a layer of erosion and sedimentation. It's not that way. Now you see that little circle right there? You see this white strip here? And all these little tiny layers and layers and layers all over this place. This is biological. And there was a bone on one area and the muscle came here. And it was an abrupt transition from here going out to the muscle. And back here it was locked into a bone. I have one in my shop, not quite that size, but exactly the same architecture. I will show you now. All right, get ready for this. Remember I showed you that white ball and then the white strap coming out, and then a whole bunch of other little pieces. I'm going to show you closely in a second. But this, and I said it was attached to a bone here, and then a muscle would run off here, and it'd be an abrupt transition. That's exactly what it is. Remember that ball, that white ball that I showed you before? This is the center attachment to the bone, whatever this was. It could have been a shoulder, I don't know what it was, but that's where they attach and lock in the tendon. The tendon just runs a little short distance, and then the muscle can do all this stuff. The tendon just does that, just barely enough, but it guides the muscle, and it has enough springiness to it that it protects from ripping the muscle. That's what the tendon is supposed to protect the muscle, basically. Now, let me show you what it looks like in the colorization. All right, here's that white ball right there. That's that white ball. This part's missing. All right, so the muscle part's missing, but I'm showing the tendon. And there's that white stripe, and then there's all these little other ones, all coming up and down, and then it goes right into the muscle. This is the red muscle. That's the sarcomeres. And it's being fed just like the crab with red blood coming out of here. There's no arms coming out of here because they're eroded away, but these are arteries, and they're servicing this with a lot of red blood because it takes a lot of red blood to run a muscle. This is tendon. You see the color there? You see that color? Totally different than this. You see the pink stuff? That's because it's muscle. This is just almost inert, this stuff here, but it is tough. And there's that white strap running back to that ball. Exactly like I showed you a minute ago out in the ocean. And the only thing that remains is this right here. Because this is tough. That is tough. The bone, the muscle, it's in the ocean, they don't hold up. But the tendon still does. So I would say, this is like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes, not millions of years. This thing laid over dead, and that was it. It started to decompose, and, as all these giant creatures were spoken of in these ancient texts. They had to be wiped off the face of the earth. Venus almost hit Earth, and it was supposedly dispatched by the feared god Jupiter. Came right out of Jupiter, 7 days, approached Earth. It was so hot, it approached with the brightness of like 10 suns or something, and it basically almost boiled all the waters on Earth, and that's what created the mud fossils. And that's the only reason there was heavy silicates in the water, is because of the membranes being broken down. I understand the chemistry extremely well, and all it was the phospholipids being broken down to aluminum silicates, and that's a product of heat. So everything's got to be changed. We got to change everything, and we are. We got some books out there. I didn't put them out myself. I honestly have nothing to do with the books, but they're based on my work and some of my papers and so forth, and my light research and everything. Because nobody would listen. Like Max Planck said, science advances one funeral at a time. Well, they're not dying off quick enough, so we got to start over. We need new books. And Paul Amatucci's putting them out. They're on Amazon, and they're very inexpensive. As far as I know, I haven't bought them. He sends them to me, and he says, "Here, I'm doing your research here. I'm putting it on paper." And a lot of it's in pictures and all kinds of crazy things about what I have stated. And he might have some statements he's making that aren't attributable to me, but my name's on the books. But most of it's my stuff. I didn't really go through every little detail, but I just asked him to be true to my work, and as far as I know, he is. And at some point, we're going to have all new, basically textbooks and a whole new school, because you can't change this overnight. I can't change it in decades. And Velikovsky wrote all this stuff 60 years ago, 70 years ago now. And it's still being dismissed, and they won't talk to you if you talk about Velikovsky. And he's the one who really did the research. So that's the guy you got to pay attention to. And it's called Worlds in Collision. That was his book. It's called Worlds in Collision. #1 on the bestseller list, the New York Times bestseller list, #1 for 11 weeks in a row. Academics were so upset they took it off the bookshelves. They had to. The publisher was going to be destroyed. They caved in and said, "All right, we'll take it back," and they did. And by the way, Velikovsky he went to every culture on the face of the planet, to their libraries, their museums, their cultural centers, everywhere. He talked to all the indigenous people, and they all had the same story. About 3,500 years ago, Venus almost hit us and then hit Mars. There it is right there. This is as wide as the whole United States. There was an impact of something. And this is what was recorded. It killed Mars, who was a god of war. Now, all of this stuff all that God stuff. I can't dispute it. If you can, good for you. I can't. We need to have an extended conversation about the earliest texts written. And Apollodorus took all of the earliest texts, especially Hesiod, and he wrote the whole story of humanity up till that point. And I think he was like, I can't remember, maybe 80 BC. Don't take me for that. I can't remember when Apollodorus compiled his work. But you had Ovid, you had Hesiod, you had Herodotus, of course you had Plato, you had a bunch of other ones. And he combined them all. And here's what he came up with. This is the theogony, which was the birth of Zeus, War of the Titans, the Olympian gods, the War of the Giants, and Typhon. And he's Typhon. I found him in the desert. There's no question whatsoever he existed. And he's there right now in the desert. Prometheus, who was actually, he claims to be the creator of mankind. He actually designed men in his workshop. And Deucalion was his son, and Deucalion is Noah. And it talks about Prometheus telling Noah, or Deucalion in Greek, that he better construct a chest so that he could ride out this devastating flood. And it goes on through the whole thing. So this is not just in the Bible. There was a devastating flood, and everybody had it recorded, so it happened. Now, was it literally sent by Zeus, who was Jupiter? Or was it just an accident? It sounds like it was sent by the feared god Jupiter. And he was, Zeus, he was a little out of control as far as, he was full of lust. And he was having sex with all of the different creatures on Earth, basically, and creating all kinds of different crazy stuff. And giants and all kinds of things. And it's all documented in here. It's as crazy as it can get. But that's just book 1. And then you go on to book 3 and Epitome and Trojan War and all of that stuff is all, everything in here, all of the ancient names that you've heard about. And they attribute them to being gods and planets, and they could change their form at will. They could be anything they wanted, anytime they want. They could turn them into a mushroom, they could turn into a leaf, they could turn into a river. And that's exactly what Ovid says. You read Ovid, metamorphosis. Metamorphosis means to transition like a butterfly into a caterpillar into a butterfly. And it's the same thing. They could do all that stuff at will. Most people have heard about this, that Prometheus gave men fire, but he also was the guy that molded men out of water and earth. So he loved the man, and he gave them fire, which Zeus did not want that. He hid it and gave it to him, and Zeus learned of it, and he ordered Hephaestus to nail his body to a mountain in Scythian mountain, and Prometheus was nailed and kept bound for many years. Every day an eagle swooped on and devoured the lobes of his liver, grew back by night. I mean, this stuff is so insane that who's ever going to believe it? It just sounds hysterical. It was the penalty that Prometheus paid for the theft of fire until Hercules afterwards released him, as we shall show in dealing with Hercules. Now here's the key. Prometheus had a son, Deucalion. That's Noah. He reigned in the regions of Pythia and married Pyrrha, the daughter of Prometheus and Pandora. Now, Pandora was the first woman who was fashioned by the gods. And Pandora was a punishment. Woman was a punishment. You ever heard of Pandora's box? It opened up and all kinds of nastiness came all over the earth. The only thing that was left in the box was hope. So now, this was, Prometheus had a son, Deucalion. Okay, so that's Noah. He reigned in this region, Pythia, and married Pyrrha, the daughter of Epithius and Pandora, the first woman fashioned by the gods. When Zeus would destroy the men of the Bronze Age with the flood, when he did, Deucalion, by the advice of his father Prometheus, constructed a chest. Having stored it with provisions, he embarked in it with Pyrrha. And then it goes on about Zeus pouring heaven rain from heaven, flooded the greater part of Greece. All men were destroyed except a few who fled to the mountains, but they didn't get away good in the neighborhood. It was then that the mountains in Thessaly parted, and all the world outside the Isthmus and Peloponnesia was overwhelmed. But Deucalion, floating in a chest over the sea for 9 days and as many nights, drifted to Parnassus, and there, when the rain ceased, he landed and sacrificed to Zeus. That doesn't mean the flood just stopped, all the water's gone. He's landed somewhere. He hit some kind of really high up spot and landed. Now, whatever happened to the rest of the water is still boiling hot water all over the earth. And that's what the mud fossils are being created now in a matter of days, weeks, months. But it was the hot water, and that was what caused the heavy silicates, which Yale talks about. And I agree with that. Well, they don't agree with me, but I agree that there was heavy silicates, and it was a watery flood, salty, watery flood, global, one quick shot, boom, they all died.